Hello, good afternoon, good evening, good morning to all of you. This is Girish Mukhai, and my co-presenter DP Prakash is also on the phone. Thank you all for joining today's webinar. We are very, very excited to speak with you. We do encourage you to ask questions. If you have any, you can type it in on the right side of your screen, and then we will address them as we find convenient during the flow of this presentation. So again, thank you so much. Again, we look forward to a fun discussion here. So initially, I'll be talking about AI/ML, and then DP Prakash will actually talk about AR and VR with a very exciting set of things that he will talk about. So again, we live in a very exciting times. Human beings, obviously, we all have good judgment and intuition, not according to my kids, about me, but rest of us. And with the AI/ML, artificial intelligence and machine learning, we can deal with a large amount of data and make predictions out of it very effectively. And then with the AR and VR, augmented reality and virtual reality, we can visualize a lot of things. In a way, machine learning oftentimes doesn't allow us to visualize, but with virtual reality and augmented reality, we can do that. And then, of course, using the human judgment, we are able to do a whole lot today as we all go through and experience that, and I'm sure the future is brighter for us. So I just want to point out, and that's the genesis of this webinar. We want to bring the first two pieces together, and then, of course, you all have incredible judgment and intuition. With that, we can make this world much more fun and powerful. So as we look at the AI/ML landscape and also the technology landscape today, if you look at the Gartner hype cycle, this is again where it shows for any new technology, it typically goes through this cycle where when the technology is invented, there is a lot of excitement, early adopters, and it goes through a phase, and then it reaches a peak where the expectations are really, really high. And then people realize that the technology may not stand up to that. And then there is a period of descent, in a way of disillusionment. And then once that is done, then things get fleshed out, and technology starts to get more practical, more applicable, more market-oriented, and then they become more robust. And then that's when there is a positive slope, as you can see, enlightenment, or when things actually start, the rubber hits the road, and things start to work really well. And then there is a time of productivity where technologies go through, where companies make the most amount of profits, and so on. And as you can see here, the various technologies that we are addressing and other things, they are at various stages of this year. For example, AR is at the cusp of taking off, and DP will talk a lot about that. If you look at virtual assistants, it did go through a phase where people were very excited, and then things shook up a little bit, and I think now we are at a stage where it is positioned again for good to see prime time as well. And then similarly, there are so many other things that we see here. Flying cars, for example, it's still at early stages. We are excited. We don't know what's going to come, but there's a lot of money invested. And time will tell when it goes through that cycle. Of course, many of you, I'm sure, must have watched the HBO show Silicon Valley, where Jin Yang, develops an app using artificial intelligence to tell if a dish on a plate is hot dog or not hot dog, right? And he got investment for that. Of course, we have come a long way since then. We can do far more than that, but this is always a good example of a use case of AI, right? Obviously, AI is everywhere today, literally in anything we do today. And on the left, as you can see here, for businesses, tons and tons of applications. In cybersecurity, AI is used to figure out any bad actors, prevent attacks, also find out why something happened, and then also positioning and learning from it to make it better. In terms of fintech and billing and expense reports, there's this company that will check your expense reports, for the company so that it can actually detect any anomalies and so on. And then in terms of recruitment, when companies are recruiting people, you can use AI and machine learning not only to identify and screen candidates in the beginning, but also help potential candidates to understand what is required and so that they can be well prepared as they come to an interview. So net, it all works well. Just wanted to show you this chart in the middle. This is actually done by CB Insights. They call it the next framework, where the x-axis talks about market strength, in which we talk about the amount of R&D investments, the interest that is coming from various investors, and also the product fit and all that. And then on the y-axis, it talks about industry adoption, where it's all about partnerships and M&A activity and all that stuff that enables the industry to adopt these technologies well. And you can see here, again, I didn't want to get into each one of those, but if you look at the various AI-related technologies, they go from experimental. If you look at capsule networks, which is a new paradigm that Jeff Hinton developed just a few years ago. It's still very, very new in terms of one of the technologies. To if you look at facial recognition, which has been used, again, we can argue if it's done well or human rights and all that, but having that aside, as a technology and as implementation, it has kind of reached that necessary environment. And then things like predictive maintenance with the proliferation of Internet of Things, we can now predict in terms of when something should be maintained before even it fails, right? And this is very important for mission-critical applications, etc. So, and then of course on the right side there is technologies that are threatening, which is reinforcement learning. In terms of autonomous driving, reinforcement learning plays a big role among other areas. So, just wanted to highlight this chart, and we can kind of see where that is headed. And if you look at what Forbes said, there are 5 trends that we should be watching in AI in 2019, this year. One is, special chips, semiconductors that are made for AI, and this is happening. Companies such as NVIDIA have pioneered this among other people, and that is definitely happening. And given the importance of sensors, given the importance of Internet of Things and connected devices, AI obviously plays hand in hand with that in order to make that effective. That is definitely happening in every way. And one of the other things is there are a lot of frameworks on neural networks and machine learning. Obviously, it's not like a religion, like you pick up Apple, iOS, or Android, so that anything that you buy is just that. We don't want it to be like that. So there is a lot of interest in interoperability between the different frameworks, and ONNX, which is basically the Open Neural Network Exchange, is one of those areas that is one of those communities that is trying to do that as well in order to make it interoperable. And obviously, the other piece is automated machine learning. So far, machine learning is all about we need to train. In the case of supervised learning, you need to label the data. You need to manually do that to a large extent. But if you can make it automated, the efficacy or efficiency of using machine learning increases tremendously. And then, of course, in the enterprise DevOps world, AI is starting to play a very significant role as well. So AI obviously succeeds with 3 main elements, as you know. One is large amount of data. Obviously, the self-driving companies, the Googles of the world, Amazons of the world, and the credit card companies of the world, they collect large amounts of data. They know buying patterns. They know what people do, when they do, how they do. And that is one of the key differentiators and one of the key necessities of making AI work. Second is the algorithm itself. Lots of frameworks, as I was mentioning before. TensorFlow. You have PyTorch that Facebook has been very active on, and TensorFlow that Google has been very active on, and then various other frameworks. And then the algorithms, most of them have been open sourced because one reason is a lot of the algorithms came up in the academic world. So the academicians like to make it available to the public, and that's what has happened. So a lot of the algorithms are available, and any of us can go in and use very advanced machine learning algorithms today. And then finally, we talked about semiconductors. You do need large processing power and specialized chips in order to make AI and machine learning work effectively. And of course, there are 2 or 3 basic types of machine learning. Just as a primer, you have unsupervised, and you have supervised, and then reinforcement. And in the case of supervised, which is what we quite a bit of companies use today. Again, one of them is to classify something, hot dog or not hot dog, something is cancer or not cancer, etc. Or you're also trying to make a prediction, right? What should be the house value based on certain data, and then you learn based on supervised learning, which means you teach the machine learning model a number of examples, and it learns the larger the number of examples, the more unbiased the examples are, and the more relevant the examples are, the better the neural network can be trained and more accurate. In the case of unsupervised learning, you do not ask for an input and an output, but rather you feed it with a lot of inputs, and then the machine learning model does some sort of clustering, right? It says, something is of this category, something is of that category, etc. And then in the case of reinforcement learning, it's almost like when we try to learn how to drive a bicycle. We fall a couple of times, we pedal left, we pedal slow, we learn from that, we adjust it, and then over time we figure out the right way to drive a bicycle. And of course, a lot of applications on reinforcement learning today that are playing a big role. Just show you that where AI is relative to a large number of technologies that we have experienced on this planet. Many technologies in the past have taken a long time in order for them to adopt, at least with an initial base of 25%, and then over time, complete adoption. I think AI, when you look at internet and when you look at mobile phones, it seems like the adoption curve is much steeper, which means we are seeing a very, very widespread adoption of that. And then same thing with proliferation, which means when almost 100% of people are using it, right? The majority of the world is using it. So I want to touch upon a number of examples of machine learning. That's what I plan to do. Even though we can spend days talking about it, I picked a few. When you look at customer service today, we all have called for customer service. That is changing. There is a paradigm going from customer service to more of a customer experience. So rather than waiting on the phone, punching press 1, press 9, press 8, and then finally telling a bunch of data on the phone, and then finally when you speak to somebody doing the same thing all over again, it's all about our experience. We want to use the phone to call possibly. On the other hand, when the customer service rep wants to tell us about something, they can send you a text on your mobile phone, or they can send you an email while you're talking to them, or they can ask you to visit a particular website. And a cumulative of all of that is our experience of whether we are troubleshooting or whether we are buying something increases dramatically. We can do that quicker, we can do that faster, and we can do it more effectively, and then we are happier customers. Our experience is a lot better, rather than the traditional customer service where we call them only when you have a problem and you get frustrated even more. So this company, Coupe, which it's a Tamil word for call, essentially is addressing this with this paradigm. Of course, the customer service contact centers where people are sitting in row after row of cubicles, that industry is getting disrupted, right? And it's, as we discussed, it's about omni-channel, which means customers would like to come and interact with multiple channels. And also context awareness. When you call or when you reach out, you don't want to be repeating yourself. And also they know what you like, and they know what your preferences are. Again, privacy concerns and encroachment on that aside, right balance of those aspects, we can do a lot. And I think AI plays a very significant role in this, both in terms of natural language processing and chatbots, all the way to understanding your preferences, making it personalized, and also ensuring that the customer service representative who's talking to you is able to give you the best experience and the best outcome for both yourself as well as for the company that they serve. When you're talking about chatbots, just a few companies, as you can see in this. Just kidding. There are, this landscape is huge. I didn't put it up just to make you look through a pair of binoculars, but rather to show you that this industry has a lot of interest. So a lot of companies are playing in this, and a lot of companies are funded by investors, and a lot of companies are becoming successful in this as well. Again, they all have their own way of doing it. They have their own way of looking at the problem, providing a solution, etc. So what I really want to talk about regarding chatbots is, what do enterprises look for? So if you are a large enterprise, you're a retailer, you're a big tech company, you are an automobile company, or whatever it is, when you implement a chatbot, what do they look for typically? One is, if you look at the table on the left side, they look at, do I want a platform or do I want a tool? If I use a tool, I need to put people to develop it. I need to build with the tool. If I use an existing platform, I can use it as is. Do you want a vertical or a horizontal solution? Which means, am I looking at a chatbot that solves a problem, for example, customer service, or conversational commerce, or lead generation, or IT help desk, etc.? Or do I have a platform that does it all, right? So that's something that they look at. And then typically chatbots do a number of applications. One is answer questions, frequently asked questions, or questions from a database that is out there, which is one of the most commonly used applications for chatbots. Second is, you do a transaction. I want to file an insurance claim, and here is my picture, here is the car, model and make, and it can actually converse with you. And once you give the information, it can file the claim for you, whether it is by voice or whether it's by text. It can do alerts, which means when it can tell you that, hey, your ticket has been resolved. Now you can access this particular application, right? It can actually tell you, or your order has been shipped, and it'll get to you a day after tomorrow, etc. And then the last part is fetch information. So when you say, hey, what is the status of my claim, or when I applied for a mortgage, etc. So it can fetch you information. It can go into a database. It can understand. It can authenticate you and then bring that information back. Right? Obviously, the value drivers, which is what enterprises do look for, is it reducing my cost, or is it increasing productivity for my employees, or is it increasing productivity for my contact center employees? Is it very convenient for my customers, or is it very convenient for my employees? To when they use the chatbot, and then is it extra revenue generator for me? Can I upsell because of this, or are people buying more? Can I lead them to the right products easily, etc. And then, of course, handing over to a live chat is very important as well. And as you can see here, the number of KPIs, the key performance indicators, precision and recall, they are very important metrics. And how fast can a chatbot learn? The machine learning algorithm, how fast it can learn becomes very, very important as well. And in terms of the time it takes for me, do I need to really prepare the data? Do I need to do a lot of curating of the data and so on? And then, of course, the total cost of ownership. And then, are my customers and employees, are they more likely to use it? Do they need behavior change in order to use it, or is it intuitive for them to do, right? And then, of course, the features of chatbots. I won't necessarily go through this. We have done in a previous webinar, but essentially, these are some of the features that enterprises are looking for in terms of speech and text, multiple channels, can it answer knowledge-based queries well, multiple languages, and then in terms of the deployment options on-prem or cloud, etc. Want to just tell you about another company which has got another application. This company is called Unifor. They are essentially into speech analytics. When a customer service rep is on the phone, they can do real-time with this software, it can actually do very real-time listening to the words, and then they use natural language processing, and then they can tell the agent, hey, you forgot to do this, or think about asking this question, etc., based on what they speak in real time. So it gives the agent a lot of ability to be more effective. It's almost like real-time coaching while they're on the phone. And examples are also, you can use it for upselling. You can use it for cross-selling purposes. You can also use them to, get the best out of customer experience there. And then another application is after the call is done, the analytics can actually give a summary that they can file, rather than the agent actually having to write it and type it, etc. So this can just do that automatically. And in fact, a lot of agents love this. In some of the case studies that they have done, it is so. The agents are very happy. None of us like to write a summary right after a call or a meeting, right? It does. And they also have a virtual assistant which can actually work on multiple languages. Very, very effective from that point, both in terms of speech and text. And then another growing area that Unifor is playing in is voice biometrics. So you can use your voice and then authenticate you for various transactions, rather than you having to repeat a password or something else. Especially you don't want to do that with an agent, and you don't want to give that information. So tremendous use cases, very, very valuable and useful, and that is being deployed pretty well. Customer service KPIs, customer service satisfaction, CSAT, which is a very important metric. In fact, a lot of bonuses and performance are based on that. And then the net promoter score, and this is what eventually a company wants, are more people recommending and promoting the product than other way around. And then third piece is very relevant today to measure, especially when employees are using a particular chatbot or a particular customer service application. Then a customer effort score, right? I just got my job done by just making a couple of quick type, a couple of quick sentences, or when I said that on the phone or on Alexa, the system was able to handle what I wanted to get done very, very quickly. So the customer effort score has become an important element in measuring that as well. And I'm going to forward that here. So another application is what is called RPA, Robotic Process Automation. These companies, I listed 3 companies here: UiPath, Blue Prism, and Automation Anywhere. And of course there are other companies as well in this field. They have seen an incredible rate of success in deploying this. You can essentially replace what a human being does, or you can work in conjunction with a human being to really automate a lot of back office processes, right? And it can go in and figure out exactly how someone is using, and including mouse clicks all the way to emails or doing any other activity, and then it can learn that, and it can then be automated. And a lot of companies are finding that using RPA enables them to be more efficient. They can do things when employees are not present, late at night, or on weekends, or on a long weekend, or when some other, we operate in a global setting, and employees from some other side of the planet are asking for information when we are not at work. So tremendous applications there. AI is being augmented to this now, and then that is going to change the way RPA is done as well. So leveraging machine learning in order to make RPA is becoming a big piece as well here. And then chatbots can be the front end to a lot of back office processing with RPAs. Another application is in networking. Networks play a big role. Our traffic has increased tremendously. If you look at what Cisco says, our traffic overall is tripling. We'll be doing about 4.8 exabytes by 2022. So the networks, even though they used to be the darling of the tech industry, now they have kind of gone through a little trough. But the demand placed on networks have increased tremendously. which means we need ways to make networks as good as what applications and microservices and hybrid cloud environments demand today. And AI is playing a big role in bridging that gap and making networks a lot more effective, both inside data centers as well as when you do software-defined wide area networking and so on. So this company, Vegayan, is addressing that need in terms of bringing AI closer to networking as well. And then in security, just want to show you one example, CloudKnox, which is a startup in the security space, in the identity management space. They find that even though a lot of people in enterprises have access to various things, but they have a lot of privileges, but it's not being effectively meted out or measured, and that could cause a lot of damage. And as you can see here, 99% of privileges they find are not being used. So they have a mechanism using machine learning to go in and find out who really needs what, and then and then make it extremely compact in terms of only the users that really need the privileges that they're using for. They have it. Others are removed, so that the overall risk for the enterprise and whether somebody does maliciously or otherwise is reduced. And then one other example. Robotics is again a startup which is using just simple smartphones mounted on cars. They look for potholes. Reminds me of a old David Letterman joke when he said, "There's a pothole on 101 that is so big there is a gift shop right in the inside of that." So none of us like potholes, and what they can do, they work with cities and engineering firms to map out with the 10-foot intervals. And then using machine learning to identify and say, fix these segments first before you go to the other segments for maximum effectiveness in terms of traffic patterns and the severity of the damages and so on. So this is a very nice use case of AI using very simple techniques. And then, obviously, whenever you do a project, you need to look at a business case, and a solid business case is exceptionally important to ensure that enterprises and businesses adopt AI and machine learning. And finally, why cure cancer and why cure heart diseases? Let's make our beer better, right? So lots of companies. There's a company that uses AI to make, it's called Intelligent X. They actually put 4 beer types: black AI, golden AI, pale AI, amber AI. And then they get feedback from customers, and then they enable this data to help the brewmasters to make the perfect beer. And then Carlsberg, the Danish company, they have a project. They call it the beer fingerprinting project. And each day they create lots of different types of beer, multiple data. Then they look at it, and then they figure out the best beer that they should be producing. And then this company in Virginia and Charlottesville, they are brewing the perfect IPA, again, using data from the best-selling and the worst-selling IPAs out there. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to DP.
Thank you, Girish. This is BP Prakash. I'm the Global Head of Innovation, particularly focused on artificial intelligence, machine learning, augmented reality, and virtual reality from the CIO office of Global Foundries. We are a semiconductor manufacturing company, and hopefully some of the learning that I'm going to share here would be relevant to you folks as well. I see that you're from many different diverse industries here. So quick summary of the big changes that have happened over the decades is shown here. Girish very nicely articulated what's going on with the AI era. The way I look at it is summarized here. The tabulating systems era, those up until the 1940s, were there. Then came the mainframes and all that followed. Up until the iPhones, we had the programmable systems era. But what we are most interested in is what's happening right now, which is what we call the augmented intelligence era. And here it's about learning, it's about reasoning, it's about interacting between man and machine like never before. So what's fueling this augmented intelligence era is, number one, the data growth. And you can see that little pinpoint there that says that we are here. And we expect to grow exponentially as we go into the future. So data, how it's growing, we're all familiar with that. It's going to be a continuing challenge. And so certainly, AI is gearing up to be the tool of choice there. Cloud, this is the wave of innovation going on right now. The businesses are transforming with cloud, the public, private. So we're all familiar with that one. Then concurrently we have the machine learning and deep learning, and the technologies that are maturing, right behind them is the augmented and virtual reality for visualization, as Girish spoke about there. So these are the broad brushstrokes of what's really going on out there. Now from this point on, the journey I'm going to share is very personal, based on everything that I've seen by traveling around the world, looking at leaders in these spaces, and also participating in many consortia, conferences, meetings, and so on, and finally distilling them and applying in my own work. And what I thought was knobs that you could use in your own businesses readily. So the framework for value creation with AI, ML, AR, VR. Now this is a mouthful, AI, ML, AR, VR, but that is what I live by every day. End-to-end integration of AI, ML linking to AR and VR. How do you do that in an enterprise? So I look at it in 4 levels. People who are experimenting with these technologies look at them as use case by use case, but it helps to look at it from an even higher perspective, where for any enterprise you will have needs at 4 levels. The most fundamental level is documentation, what we call job-based instructions or standard operating procedures. Now, without that, any enterprise will have variability built into it. With the documentation in place, the next step is going to be how you train your workforce. And once you have the training done, then the next step is going to be your operations, how you actually implement it. You can be really good with training, but it's how you play on that particular day that makes a difference. So what are the tools you can bring to the table with operations makes the next big difference. And ultimately, if we have the first 3 levels, the foundational levels taken care, an organization's efficiency is going to be determined by how well you handle the analytics. So this is how the AI, ML, AR, VR framework looks to me right now. So going a little deeper, if you look at the documentation, how do you create SOPs? Now, up until now, typically people would take a Word document, or if you look at more advanced, people will take some photographs, people will take some videos, and so on. Right now, we can do all of that at 10x faster speed, including a 3D immersive experience with augmented reality. And so this is a game-changing development that's coming up for organizations that are looking to get their SOPs done fast. You should try the augmented reality tools that are becoming available. So again, like I said, 2D images along with your text materials, 3D experiences, all that stuff is now very rapidly you can actually create. In the training standpoint, you can look at it in 2 ways. One, how do you train people in a classroom environment? And second, if you have, like me, a factory floor, then a place where action's actually happening, then how do you train people on the job as the action happens? So we have found that virtual reality in the case of manufacturing is a better fit for classrooms, classroom training. There you could use Unity, Autodesk. You could have certainly Global Foundries AMD processors are there. You could use those to run the systems, and HTC Vive is one of the headsets that we actually use. But this space is going through year over year. We see improvements coming there. So virtual reality is, even though in CES and so on, that's the Consumer Electronics Show, there's a lot of doom and gloom about AR, VR. That's mostly people talking about consumer space. In the enterprise space, I would say enterprise AR, VR is real. The value is real. And it's only going to improve from here. So people are going to get in right now are going to be the ones reaping the benefits. and then the people who sit by the sidelines. That's what I've learned. For augmented reality, you have the Vuforia PTC platform. They're a strategic partner of ours, and so they are ranked number 1 in the IoT AR space. Very sophisticated platform, and coupled with tools such as headsets, such as your RealWear or your HoloLens, or even the iPad, you can create AR experiences. AR and VR is a space where innovations are happening. Every quarter looks like a year. So that's how much we see new developments happening. Even by end of this month, Microsoft is likely to release the HoloLens 2. So things are improving, fairly rapidly there. So it's important to keep up there to improve your training value proposition. Operations-wise, there you have the you can see the 3 items I've listed there. In terms of the mobility, the idea there is this: gone are the days when people were tethered to their 2-dimensional surfaces called the laptops or your desktops. Those days are gone. In the factory floor where things are mobile, things have to happen really fast. We are now having wearables with RealWear, Google Glass. Google introduced the concept of Google Glass, but they aimed at the consumer space and they met with a lot of resistance there. Whereas like HoloLens with Microsoft, they went after the enterprise space and they're succeeding. So Google Glass coming back into the enterprise space now. RealWear, meanwhile, has made tremendous progress. That's a good headset. You should take a look at. The noise cancellation is outstanding, and it basically means you'll see when I show you some data there. The users are now mobile. Data goes with you as opposed to you being tethered to a computer. Then remote expert assist there. That's a new tool that's coming up. You can create experiences that go beyond, say, a FaceTime iPhone experience. You can actually augment it by having annotations. I'll show you how that actually helps in just a moment. Chatbots we just spoke about, TextBot, natural language processing bot, and finally the avatar bot. Girish actually mentioned that. Human-machine interface is going through a sea change. Just up until now, hey Alexa, do this for me. Hey Google, do this for me. You're talking to a machine. But if the machine has a human personality, an avatar, then it changes the game that much more because of human empathy. So that's what's going on in the chatbots space on the factory floor. Analytics-wise, here certainly you have the big players on the cloud. Certainly you have the Amazons, the Googles, the Microsofts of the world playing there. Creation of AI ML engines will ultimately determine how well an organization can actually adapt to change and actually react. So that's certainly at the top of the value chain there. Predictive maintenance, using digital twins of every tool that you use, expensive tools, so you can drive corrective maintenance faster. So this is the overall, this is the main message, probably the most valuable chart. But from here, let me actually show you, some evidence for what I'm saying here. So for AR VR strategy, for people who have not seen the seminal paper by Professor Michael Porter and CEO of PTC, Jim Heppelman, you should read this paper. It's why every organization needs an AR strategy. The basic premise is simple. It says, with data growing so rapidly, you must reduce cognitive load. So any tool that actually makes your brain work less, machine work more, is going to be adopted. So in terms of documenting, visualizing, training, interacting, simulating, AR, VR are going to play a role. Now, for people who look at the paper on the left side, it looks like paper. But when you hold a cell phone with again, it's all explained in the paper. You can see how you can download an app called Harvard Business Review Augmented Reality app and from the App Store. And the whole buildings and the factory floor, the tools, they come alive with their KPIs. So the idea here is when you walk inside a factory floor, it's no longer what meets your eye. It is the cloud data coming in real time in front of where you are and giving you information, making you augmented. So that's where the game is. So I would recommend that you read this paper. The documentation use case, you can see companies coming up now, and the idea here is that no longer do you just write down a piece of paper, or Word document, PDF documents. The idea here is to document in real time with the expert, and the idea here is that nearly 100% of the expert's experience can now be captured, distributed, and accessed very, very quickly. This is a revolution going on in the AR space. if you look at the next level, this is training in the classroom. No longer do you need to go to a factory floor in front of a tool, if you're like me, bunny suiting up and so on. The tool now comes to where the student is, where the employee is. We can bring it in 3D. I'm not playing the video here, but you can actually imagine it's an immersive experience. The whole tool comes in front of you and you can train like never before. You can cross-train. You can do any number of training in a quiet environment. So training is going through a major change. If you look at how people buy their homes, that's going to go through a change. In virtual reality world, in construction, factory designs, and so on, people are already beginning to use VR as a standard tool to collaborate on designs and show customers how the experience is going to be once it's finished construction. Before you even set one brick for construction in real life, you can go in and experience and make changes and avoid costly design errors. So with VR, and this is Autodesk, you can actually see BIM 360. These tools are now beginning to get widely adopted. So if you can go inside a building and start taking measurements, question is, what else can you do with a tool like that? Where I am is I make semiconductor wafers for a living. And the idea is that if you go and say walking inside a chip or walking inside a wafer, typically you'll see essays saying that since you cannot walk inside a wafer, since you cannot walk inside a chip, that's how the story goes. But we changed the game. We are now, in this case, working with USC faculty there. Using X-ray diffraction technique, you can now gather the data in 3D for a whole entire semiconductor wafer, and you can now walk inside at any particular point. So what's the big deal? You can look at design to manufacturing deltas and catch errors for critical chips. So that is an example of innovation that only VR can get us to do. This is another groundbreaking work that came out of my lab here, and you can see that's actually a little slice of a ring oscillator made with 7 nanometer nanotechnology. The idea there is that in the cross section of your human hair, we can now put, with 14 nanometer technology, we can now put 1 million transistors. Just pause for a moment and think. In the cross section of your hair, 1 million transistor switches can now be placed. Now that is incredible to fathom, leave alone how do you visualize something like that? Well, virtual reality comes to the rescue, and you can actually go around and see at a scale that simply could not be seen any other way. It's immersive, and we're inventing a whole new field called chip anatomy, where layer by layer you can take it apart. Think about yourself like King Kong walking around New York City. That's how the chip would look like for you. So man landed on the moon in 1969. 50 years later, diametrically opposite side, man walks inside a nanotechnology chip. So glad to be part of that milestone for humanity there. So here, let me see here if that plays. I can't seem to play the video, but since we said we can walk inside a building, we can walk inside an equipment, a tool, an expensive tool. We said we can walk inside a wafer, a silicon wafer. We can walk inside a chip. So we challenged ourselves to say, can we walk inside a human brain? And hopefully this will be posted, and you folks can look at the video yourself. I can't seem to play the video here. But the concept is you can walk inside anything 3D. If you have a 3D data that you've collected, it doesn't matter what it is. It could be your heart, it could be your artery, it really doesn't matter. Virtual reality will take you inside, and you can actually walk around, make measurements and so on, and study it like never before. So absolutely fascinating work going on in the field of VR. Let me see here if I can go to the next one. Okay, assisted reality in operations. Now we look some of the augmented reality applications. You can see here, this is a follow-on to Google Glass. This is a RealWear headset. The idea here is that when you wear heavy headsets like let's say HoloLens, it has applications, but you don't want to be wearing that and walking around for too many hours. But people who do work when they need data to follow them, data that frees them from their the tethered laptop or desktop, they would prefer the data is there on demand, on call, literally on call. It's hands-free, voice activated, and you can pull up charts. And for people who are doing work with their hands, this is a big big deal. So light form factor, excellent noise cancellation capability in a loud environment. This actually works. RealWear is one of the tools there. Google Glass also is coming back. There'll be other form factor devices, but assisted reality, it's two-dimensional data and video coming to you. So data follows the user. That is we see as a game changer for some of the use cases. This is a remote expert assist with augmented reality that's quite popular now. As we are beginning to explore this, people are quite interested in this, and for several reasons listed here. What is the idea? If you are standing in front of an equipment, it could be your big expensive machines, or it could be a washing machine, it could be like any tool that you're working with. If you have to have an expert come over to your office, your factory floor, your home, and then do the work, diagnostics work, that's expensive. There's all this travel and all the associated costs, like accommodation involved. What if you are able to have a FaceTime-like call, except that you can annotate? You can see what the problem is, and you can annotate in 3D. What exactly? You can see the yellow mark, you can see the green marks. You can have an exchange that's much more deeper with the voice, visual, and problem solving. So seeing it, solving it together using an augmented reality application. That's what this is about. In this case, it's PTC Vuforia Chalk. So that is used to explain the concept. So it reduces travel costs. It can apply the service expertise efficiently. So the service expert doesn't have to travel all the way. Instead, he or she can end up servicing a lot more people. It's good for them. They make more money. It's good for the customer because it's a lower cost for the same service. And you can improve communications within your organization as well. So within an organization, let's say you have multiple different places where your company has branches, you can improve communication that way as well. So that is the augmented reality latest application. Virtual assistants. We talked about chatbots and the human-machine interface, and this is an example of what Amazon just released in November at the Reinvent conference. You can see to the left, those are the avatars that are coming up. That in Sumerian augmented reality platform, they now have functioning. Any of you can actually download that and start creating AR applications that speak. What is special about this? They look at your eye, they track your eye, they have human features, they move like humans. They're able to take your input voice command, process that in NLP, natural language processing AI, that you can teach, and then come back in real time, near real time, respond back to you. So it's a improvement. Think about it as Alexa 2.0. Instead of talking to a black box, a machine, you're now talking to a machine with a human interface. You literally can walk up to a machine and start speaking to it. So I would say for 6-year-old kids, that's no big deal. They're saying, look, it's just Alexa, right? But for people in the enterprise space, walking into a factory floor and having a machine speaking, that is another way to can access data more efficiently. So it increases self-service and it reduces IT tickets. We are working on, HR applications, IT applications, just the beginning, and these kinds of virtual assistants are going to be more and more, prevalent. And on the right, that's me, and you can see with Amazon that there was one of the virtual assistants taking my order for latte, and the human was only serving me the latte while the virtual assistant did all the order taking. So this is now. So in conclusion, here are the main takeaways from what I just shared with you. AI/ML to AR/VR end-to-end integration, it will transform organizations. These technologies are advancing documentation, training, operations, and analytics. You'll remember the 4 levels in the pyramid I shared with you. Augmented reality enables up to 10x faster SOP documentation, in some cases 20x, and it's advancing rapidly. For SOP creation, this is something you should take note of. Virtual reality enables 3D visualization of any object. Could be a building, equipment, wafer, chips, human brain, any part of a human body, or what have you. VR allows you to walk inside. The technology is mature. AI engines are powering predictive maintenance and operations, and certainly Girish took us through an exhaustive list there that was quite impressive. But that will also be deepened with RPA, the robotic process automation, as he spoke about. Finally, for AI to AR, end-to-end integration, we're going to see more and more of those types of activities. AI/ML will tell you what signals to look at. AR and VR will tell you how to look at it and how to visualize it. End-to-end applications like virtual assistants and digital twins, this is just the beginning of the fun. So these are, some of the highlights that I've gathered, and these, are on track to driving business value.
Awesome. Hey, DP, there is one question. Do you want to take that one? from the audience. It says, how fast will VR AI replace the manual process of documentation in machine learning and compliance? I know you talked a lot about documentation. Do you want to address this, DP?
All right, let me read this. How fast will AI and VR replace the manual process of documentation in machine learning and compliance? I see. So what I would say is that the documentation with AR is just coming out of the it's emerging technology. We are not at a point where it's not mature. There's still bugs in there, but what we can see is the promise that it holds, that we can do things pretty rapidly. We are not at a point where we can say that from a compliance and so on, we are near there. But what I can say is that if I were to make it very real for me, we have to make chips for, let's say, the automotive industry, and their standard operating procedures for at a deeper level are required. What we can say is that we can do much faster than before using this technology, but it still requires a human intervention to stitch some things together. So we are not at a point where it's completely automated.
Yeah. Are there any other questions? Please feel free to ask us. We have a few more minutes, but I do want to emphasize again that when you AI is a tool, right? Machine learning is a tool.
Girish, another question came up.
Okay.
How can we make sure that the results from ML are accurate and reliable and not noise?
Yes.
For enterprise use cases, ability to trust the result is key. Go ahead, Girish.
Yeah. So let me take that. Very, very good question. It is obviously a lot of work going on. Number one work that is going on is explainability in machine learning, because a neural network is almost like a black box. You feed in data, you get an output. But nowadays there is a lot of work going on in terms of how to explain, why the AI model or machine learning model is telling you something is cancerous or something is not, or the house value should be 1.2 million and not 1.5 million. So you should be able to explain that. And I think the way this can be done is a number of things. One is just like how we would do in statistics, right? Train it with a lot of data. Train it with data that is unbiased. Train it with data that is, and then test it with. So when you let's say you have 100 data points, you train it with 60, and then you test it on the other 40 in different ways, so that you can then trust saying that when you test it on a sample, and you also know the result of that already, the output of that, then you can verify with it. So I think there is a lot of art behind it, in addition to the science part of it. But the more you do this in a scientific manner, at the same time, you also use the different data sets and then known data sets and known inputs and outputs. Then you can try it with that. That'll actually develop a trust with it, right? So that's what it's all about. It's not blindly going with a data set and then following what the machine learning algorithm does. That's why the judgment and intuition of human beings play a huge role in this.
Okay, another question came up. Can you bring back the slide before the dock training triangle? I had a question, but moved too fast. So let me see if I can go there.
And some people asked about slides. What we'll do is we will find a way to publish this. You can connect with us on LinkedIn or send a note to the BrightTALK folks, and we are glad to share some of the slides.
Okay, so here is a question. I had a question but moved on too fast, so I don't know what. Here's a slide, right? Not sure exactly what the question is. Okay, another question came up. Are there any open platforms available to explore AR and VR? Right now, the most dominant platform is Vuforia for AR. For virtual reality, we have the Unity, and associated with that would be Autodesk. So between Unity, these are gaming engines. So Unity or Unreal Engine for VR, you could use those. For AR, Sumerian AR from Amazon's available. My knowledge is for AR with Euphoria, with VR it is with Unity to actually go and crank out some use cases. But this is a good question. So if you can write to me, you can see my LinkedIn address there. I can give you more details about the other platforms that are available.
Excellent. Folks, any other questions? Again, this is meant to be a discussion, and again, I know many of you and all of you, I'm sure, are experts in various things. We would love to collaborate in various forms and shapes to get us all, use AI, machine learning, AR and VR to improve all our lives.
Okay, so while they're coming up with that, I would also go back to address the one other question that was asked earlier. How fast will the documentation process to be replaced? My outlook is that I think by end of the year, it's very real probability that enterprises will start adopting AR for the documentation use case. So that should tell you, how mature it's likely to be. We're seeing the promise is exciting. So watch that space. I would say, in 1 to 2 years, that could become a very real possibility. Compliance is a different issue, but automating it where this becomes a de facto standard, that is likely, I would say, in the next year or so. That's how fast it's moving.
Just want to move the slide to the LinkedIn profile, DP, so that the folks can see our LinkedIn.
Right. One of the users actually answered, you can build AR with Unity, Euphoria, AR Kit, AR Core. Absolutely right.
Hey, one other question that came up on AI, are there any recommendations on the algorithms? I'm going to be answering like an accounting person. It depends. It all depends on what you really want to use it for. There are, for example, TensorFlow is a very good framework to use, but the exact algorithm that you would use depends on what you're doing. For example, in a lot of the chatbots, natural language processing cases, people use word-to-vector and LSTM, long short-term memory, in certain things. And they also use similar algorithms for sentiment analysis, for example. But it depends on what exactly that you're looking for. And there's a whole body of research, whole body of recommendations for using these algorithms. I'm sure you can find it in terms of based on the use case.
That said, I would also say that if you look at Amazon's most used in the Amazon Cloud Platform, one of the most used I'd say algorithm happens to be TensorFlow, and so of course there are, like Girish said, it really depends on what problem you're trying to solve.
Awesome. So DP, why don't we wrap it up? We are also coming to the top of the hour here. So thank you, guys. I really appreciate all of you joining us today, and we would love to stay in touch with you and explore more things together.
Yes, we welcome you to connect with us. Our LinkedIn profile, it's there. Connect with us. Send us your contact info. Ask us your questions there. Let's continue the conversation. Thanks for sharing this hour with us.
Thanks, everyone. Cheers. Bye.
Bye.